Hello, I'm Sarah Payne and this is the first instalment of a series of videos and blogs covering developing in C# under Linux, specifically the Ubuntu distribution. We're generally going to be using the JetBrains Rider and comparing that to how it would be done under Visual Studio from Microsoft and Windows. It is part of a general blog, as I said, that will be a whole series. We're now going to start in Ubuntu by launching Rider. When Rider first starts up, we're presented with a window. In this area here, if there were any existing projects you'd worked on recently within Rider, it would be shown here. Beyond that, the options are pretty standard. Create new projects, open existing ones, open a file or folder but not as part of a project, and go from version control. We can compare this now to Windows and Visual Studio. Anyone familiar with Visual Studio will know this screen very well, and as you can see there's an almost identical set of options. Recent projects would be here, opening existing files and folders, opening existing project solution, cloning from version control, and creating new projects. I'm going to start by clicking the Create New Project in Visual Studio. And this is where we start to see the differences between the two. Under Visual Studio, by default, we have this hugely long list that will vary depending on the different options you chose when you were setting up your Visual Studio installation. These can be filtered by different languages and by different platforms and also project types. If we flick back across now to Ubuntu and Rider, we get what appears to be at first a much smaller list of options. Now there are two reasons for this. The first is that JetBrains Rider is focused solely on one area of development, and JetBrains offer different applications for different areas of development, whereas Visual Studio is an all-in-one depending on the options you install. The other difference is that Rider offers nested menus rather than one project per type. For example, this is a console application under .NET Core. It's using .NET 5 at the moment, but I can change that here. If I had .NET Core 2 installed, that would be there as well. I just don't have that installed, which is one of the things I should mention at this point. Unlike under Windows, when you install Visual Studio, it installs lots of .NET SDKs in the background. That doesn't happen under Linux, and we do need to install all the different SDKs manually. The same is true under Windows, of course, for Rider there, if you don't install Visual Studio first. Here we get to choose all the different languages. As we can see, because this is .NET Core 3, the frameworks are not available, whereas under the newer .NET 5, which isn't technically a .NET Core, we do also have the frameworks available. Okay, so we're going to go back to 3 and then create a new project. And that's the options for version control, and this is now completely loaded. We're going to do exactly the same one under Visual Studio now. Okay, so we're back under Windows and Visual Studio. Almost identical process. One thing I will just point out at this stage is that under Visual Studio, .NET 5 won't be shown by default even if you have it installed at this stage. I'm sure that will change in the future. But at the moment it is not set up by default. If you want to see your .NET 5 options, it's under Options, and then there are Preview Features, and you can select the options for that here. And that's it. This is the very basic console app under both Rider and under Visual Studio. Both are opened. What I'm going to do now is drop back down into Linux and look at the different ways of setting up the .NET environment. Down at the bottom of the blog you will see a section on installing the different requirements for development on Linux. Rider does automatically detect any SDK that is installed, and I've put the instructions for Ubuntu on here. I'm going to run through all of these and also show you where to go for full instructions for other distributions and platforms. The Mono project is how we develop for .NET under Linux, and you can find full instructions for a variety of different distributions and platforms here. I'm using a clean installation of Ubuntu on the virtual machine for the demonstration of the actual install, so the options you see on my menu will look slightly different, and that's why. On second thoughts, actually I will add the installation of the .NET Core SDKs and Mono as a completely separate video. Thank you for watching. Bye.